Under the fading light that hovered over Los Angeles, the glittering towers of Forrester Creations gleamed like mirrors, cold, perfect, and merciless. The fashion house had long been a fortress of beauty and ambition, but behind its polished walls, darkness had begun to coil again. Luna's death had already shattered the illusion of safety within the Forrester empire. Now, whispers rippled through the halls that another tragedy was looming. No one knew how soon the next name would fall into infamy, but fate was already choosing its victim, Katie Logan. Her end would come not from some distant enemy or a stranger's hand, but from within the family she had devoted her life to protecting. For weeks, Katie had been uneasy. She sensed that the tides inside Forrester Creations were changing in ways she couldn't control. Brooke, once her closest ally and sister, had become distant, smiling too brightly in meetings, taking phone calls that ended abruptly when Katie entered the room. It was the same instinct that had warned Katie years ago when affairs, betrayals, and rivalries had destroyed their family before. The corridors of Forrester were filled with familiar faces, but behind every cordial greeting lay suspicion. When the company released its newest campaign, Katie's name was nowhere on the press materials. Her signature, once stamped across every public relations directive, had been erased. The revelation came without ceremony, as most betrayals do. In a boardroom full of executives, Brooke had announced a restructuring, a fresh vision for a modern era. Katie's title was quietly omitted from the announcement. No one dared to look at her directly, but everyone felt the tension radiating from her seat like static before a storm. When the meeting adjourned, she followed Brooke down the hallway, her heels striking the marble like the rhythm of anger barely restrained. Brooke turned, her composure perfectly intact. She had always been a master of appearances, every gesture polished, every smile deliberate. Katie, trembling with disbelief, demanded an explanation. Brooke's response was measured, even clinical. "It's time for a change." Those words cut deeper than any accusation could. For years, Katie had watched Brooke ascend, glowing in every spotlight, loved by every man Katie had ever wanted, forgiven for every mistake she made. Katie had accepted it all, telling herself that love, family, and loyalty were worth more than envy. But standing there, stripped of her title, her voice, her dignity, Katie felt something inside her fracture. What began as an argument spiraled into chaos. Brooke had intended to calm her, to explain that the decision wasn't personal, that it was for the company's image, but Katie wasn't listening. She saw only the glint of hypocrisy, the face of a sister who had taken everything from her one piece at a time. Years of resentment poured out, every humiliation, every betrayal, every sacrifice that went unnoticed. Brooke's voice rose in frustration, matching Katie's fury until both women were shouting over each other, each trying to reclaim the narrative of their shared, poisoned history. The confrontation turned physical before either could stop it. Katie shoved Brooke first, perhaps without realizing it, perhaps just to make her feel the weight of pain she'd caused. Brooke stumbled backward, catching herself on the desk, but her hand instinctively reached for something, anything, to defend herself. Her fingers wrapped around a silver pen, heavy and sharp at the tip, the kind executives used to sign multi-million-dollar contracts. Katie lunged again, her face inches from Brooke's, her voice hoarse with rage. And then it happened. The moment was so brief that neither woman could process it. Brooke's hand moved, a flash of motion born from panic rather than intent, and the pen drove forward with sickening precision. A small sound escaped Katie's lips, a gasp, a breath that never became a scream. The pen pierced deep, finding the fragile rhythm beneath her ribs. For a second, everything froze. Brooke's eyes widened in disbelief as Katie stumbled backward, clutching her chest. The pen protruded grotesquely, its silver now streaked with red. Katie's expression was one of confusion, as if she couldn't comprehend that her own sister's hand had done this. Brooke dropped the pen, her fingers trembling, her mind blank. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed like a verdict. She took a step forward, calling out, but Katie was already collapsing, her knees buckling, her body folding to the ground. The blood spread across the carpet in a widening circle, dark and irreversible. For a moment, Brooke thought she could still fix it, call for help, stop the bleeding, take it all back, but the truth was merciless. Katie's body was still. Her eyes, open but unseeing, stared toward the ceiling where the Forrester logo gleamed, a cruel reminder of everything she had lost her life defending. The silence that followed was unbearable. Brooke backed away slowly, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant chatter from another office, the ordinary sounds of a normal workday. It was obscene that the world could continue when her hands were stained with her sister's blood. The panic rose, animal and raw, drowning out reason. She turned and ran. In the corridors, her reflection followed her in every mirror and glass wall, her face pale, her eyes wide, her lipstick smudged with fear. She tried to wipe her hands clean, but the blood smeared instead, a reminder of the moment that could never be undone. She didn't stop running until she reached the parking lot, the California sun too bright, too cruel in its clarity. The world looked exactly the same, but Brooke knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. As she drove away, her thoughts came in fragments, memories of childhood, laughter, promises made and broken. She remembered the times she had comforted Katie through heartbreak, how Katie had forgiven her again and again for taking the men she loved, the spotlight she deserved. And now, in one terrible instant, she had taken the last thing Katie had, her life. Inside Forrester Creations, the discovery came hours later. A janitor found the body, and within minutes the building was swarming with police. Reporters gathered at the gates like vultures drawn to fresh tragedy. The Logan name, once synonymous with glamour and resilience, was now tied to scandal and death. The media would feast on it, turning their private grief into spectacle. Brooke, meanwhile, hid. She couldn't face the flashing cameras, the gasps of disbelief, or the condemnation in Ridge's eyes when he learned the truth. Every instinct told her to confess, but fear was stronger. She imagined herself in handcuffs, her legacy destroyed, her family turning against her. She told herself it was an accident, that she hadn't meant to kill Katie, but the image of her sister falling replayed over and over, unrelenting. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the pen, the blood, the shock frozen on Katie's face. Days passed, and the city's grief transformed into curiosity, then suspicion. Investigators found Brooke's fingerprints on the pen, the blood on her blouse hidden hastily in a garbage bin. The story broke like a wildfire. Brooke Logan under investigation for sister's death. The public was divided. Some called it a tragic accident, others whispered darker theories of rivalry, and envy finally pushed too far. Ridge refused to believe it at first, clinging to the image of the woman he'd loved for decades, but evidence was merciless. At the Forrester mansion, silence reigned. Donna wept openly, unable to process how their family had fractured again. The fashion empire they'd helped build now stood as a monument to their ruin. Every runway, every campaign, every glittering event now carried the shadow of blood. Brooke withdrew from everyone. Guilt ate at her in private, turning her reflection into something unrecognizable. She imagined Katie's voice, soft and accusing, echoing in the dark corners of her mind. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating, living in a state of suspended torment. The world still called her Brooke Logan, the face of Forrester, but she felt like a ghost trapped between her past and her punishment. In the end, it wasn't the police who found her. It was Ridge. He discovered her at the old Forrester cabin, sitting by the fireplace, the same place they had once celebrated birthdays and reconciliations. She looked hollow, her eyes distant, as if she had already been living her sentence in her mind. When Ridge approached, she didn't resist. She simply whispered that she had tried to protect herself, that she never meant for any of it to happen. But even as she said it, she knew words couldn't cleanse what she'd done. Katie's funeral was small but heartbreaking. Her son stood in silence, clutching a photograph, while the rest of the family struggled to speak. The Logan sisters, once symbols of unity, were now divided by death. Brooke watched from afar, unseen, her heart breaking at the sound of the eulogy. The sky was gray, as if even the heavens refused to forgive. As the weeks turned into months, the story faded from headlines, but not from memory. Forrester Creations rebuilt its image, releasing new collections, hiring new faces. But behind the glamour, the ghosts remained. Every time someone passed the boardroom where it happened, they felt the chill, the faint echo of Katie's final breath. And Brooke, wherever she went, carried her sister's shadow with her. She had built her life on ambition, charm, and survival, but in the end, it was her inability to let go of power that destroyed everything she loved. The world would remember the scandal, the whispers, the sensational headlines, but only Brooke would remember the truth, that in trying to protect her position, she had killed the only person who ever truly believed she could change. Thus, the legacy of the Logans, glittering, beautiful, and doomed, continued to unravel. Luna's death had been the beginning, Katie's the consequence, and somewhere in the future, more secrets waited to surface. At Forrester Creations, beauty would always come at a price, and Brooke Logan had paid the ultimate one. From the moment Luna Nozawa stumbled into the chaotic world of the bold and the beautiful, her story always felt as if it were balancing on a tightrope stretched between destiny and disaster. She was introduced as a spark of youthful optimism, bright enough to illuminate even the darkest corners of the Forrester universe, yet she carried the kind of fragile innocence that rarely survives long in a landscape defined by manipulation, betrayal, and generational war. Her downfall, when it finally arrived, should have carved itself into the memory of the audience with the sharp finality of a shattered dream. Instead, it unfolded with an unsettling quietness, a narrative fade-out rather than a crescendo, leaving viewers with the hollow feeling of a door closing without the slam it deserved. Those familiar with the wild elasticity of daytime television know one thing well: no one stays dead forever. Time, for soap opera characters, bends like warm metal. It folds, rewinds, skips, and resurrects. Villains return in disguises, lovers reappear after decades, presumed dead children materialize as teenagers overnight. But Luna's ending, so abrupt, so strangely contained, evoked none of that playful elasticity. It came with the eerie weight of finality, the kind that signals not just a character's exit, but a creative intent to bury her story without ceremony. And that, more than any part of the plot, is what ignited the disappointment fans felt so sharply. Her death, according to the show, came in the chaos of a frantic escape, a moment of desperation where she fled into the road, stepped into the path of an oncoming car, and was struck before anyone could reach her. A single misstep, a single breath too late, and the girl who once symbolized hope became just another cautionary tale scribbled hastily into the margins of the Forrester family saga. Lee, usually the fierce protector capable of performing medical miracles even in the most improbable circumstances, could only watch the light leave her niece's eyes. The scene, which should have been emotionally explosive, felt distant instead, told not through visceral storytelling, but through the detached recounting of Sheriff Baker, whose clinical summary did nothing to honor Luna's emotional weight within the narrative. The reactions online were immediate, fierce, and revealing. Fans felt cheated not merely by Luna's death, but by the manner in which her final moments were handled, off-screen, secondhand, devoid of the layered grief and raw humanity that usually accompany the death of a central character. Even those who disliked the direction of her recent arcs agreed on one point: Luna deserved better than to be written off like a footnote. To understand why her exit struck such a raw nerve, one must first understand what Luna represented within the emotional architecture of the bold and the beautiful. She entered the world as an outsider, untouched by the cynicism and power struggles that drive so many of the Forrester and Spencer storylines. Her presence offered a counterbalance, A reminder that innocence, however fragile, still had a place among the tangled histories and burning ambitions of Los Angeles's glittering elite. When she laughed, it felt genuine. When she struggled, it felt relatable. And when she loved, she did so with a sincerity that contrasted sharply with the transactional relationships swirling around her. Luna's vulnerability was her defining trait, but it was also her downfall. She was drawn into a vortex of manipulation and confusion, especially the notorious drug-laced storyline that rendered her incapable of consenting to the moment that would ultimately shatter her relationships and self-identity. She became a vessel for chaos she never intended to create. Yet even then, her character responded not with venom or cunning, but with remorse, fear, and a desperate desire to make things right. Her arc was meant to be a journey of resilience. Instead, it became a countdown to collapse. When viewers complained that her ending felt like a Scooby-Doo chase followed by a quick reset, they were mourning not just the death of a character, but the death of potential. Luna's story could have spiraled into redemption, confrontation, or reinvention. Instead, it ended with a quiet thud, a narrative shortcut that ignored the emotional investment the audience had built over the months. One critic put it painfully well: "We deserve to see her final moments. Not a recap, not a summary, an actual goodbye." And they were right. Soap operas thrive on emotional spectacle. They do not simply tell tragedy, they savor it, stretch it, explore every angle of grief, guilt, and consequence. Yet for Luna, the camera looked away. To further complicate the issue, Luna's death did not ripple outward with the impact one would expect. Characters who should have been devastated suddenly reverted to business as usual. Bill and Katie drifted into long, repetitive discussions about their relationship, discussions that felt especially hollow when placed side by side with the abrupt vanishing of a young woman whose life was cut short under traumatic circumstances. The narrative dissonance was jarring. Luna's death should have been a turning point. Instead, it was treated like a commercial break. Even Sheila, a character who, against all odds, forged a strange emotional connection with Luna, was denied the opportunity to grieve on screen. The relationship between them was fraught, unpredictable, and complicated, but real in a way that demanded exploration in the aftermath of Luna's death. Yet viewers were robbed of that too. Sheila's heartbreak, which could have opened a rare window into her humanity, was skipped entirely. The discontent deepened when fans began to speculate whether Luna was truly dead. After all, in soap logic, a body unseen is a death unconfirmed. Some viewers voiced outright skepticism, refusing to believe she was gone until they saw her in a coffin, an unsettling but telling reflection of how often this genre rewrites mortality. Others feared the writers would conveniently claim she had been cremated off-screen, a choice that would delete any possibility of resurrection and make her ending unequivocally permanent. But the frustration was not rooted in a desire to resurrect her. Rather, it stemmed from the way her death was framed, unearned, anticlimactic, and missing the emotional gravity that the narrative itself had promised. In truth, Luna's story was always building toward a reckoning. Her relationships, her secrets, her entanglement with the Forrestos and Spencers, all of it hinted at a future defined by transformation, not obliteration. Her death short-circuited that trajectory. It created an emptiness that felt not tragic, but accidental, as though the writers had skipped several chapters and hurried straight to the epilogue. The narrative silence surrounding Luna's final moments is perhaps the most troubling part of the story. Why was she denied the dignity of a proper send-off? Why were her last thoughts, fears, or fragments of hope left unexplored? Why did the camera turn away when it should have leaned in? To answer these questions, one must look beyond the plot and examine the emotional architecture of the bold and the beautiful, a world built on spectacle. The show has never shied away from drama. Overdoses, kidnappings, plane crashes, shootings, falls from cliffs, mistaken identities, secret children, and miraculous returns from the dead. Yet amidst all that chaos, Luna's death stands out not for its shock, but for its stillness. This quietness created a rupture in the emotional rhythm of the series. Tragedy in this universe is rarely quiet. It screams. It claws. It demands attention. Luna's tragedy whispered instead, and in that whisper, fans heard not artistic choice but narrative dismissal. They sensed a lost opportunity, the erasure of a character whose depth had barely begun to unfold. The debate surrounding her ending has become less about Luna herself and more about how stories deserve to be told. What is the value of a character? What is the responsibility of a narrative to honor the emotional truth of its creations? What happens when a story skips the most important beats? Luna's death raises these questions with painful clarity. Still, tragedy, however mishandled, creates a vacuum, and vacuums in daytime drama inevitably fill. The absence of Luna has already begun reshaping the emotional geography of the show. Characters will fracture, blame will shift, secrets will surface, and guilt will carve itself into the hearts of those who remain. Even if the show refuses to linger on her final moments, the shadow of her loss will linger in countless small ways: a tremor in a voice, an unresolved accusation, a moment of silence where once there was laughter. Because a death, even a narratively muted one, creates echoes. And the question now is whether the bold and the beautiful will follow those echoes, or bury them. Luna deserved a better ending, but endings, especially in a soap opera, are never truly final. Whether she remains gone forever or rises again in some unexpected twist matters less than what her story reveals about storytelling itself. She was a reminder of what this genre does best when it allows itself to create characters who feel human, fragile, hopeful, and heartbreakingly real, even amidst the melodrama. Her death, stripped of spectacle, becomes its own kind of statement. Not the one the writers intended, perhaps, but one that resonates nonetheless. A reminder that endings matter. A reminder that characters matter. A reminder that stories must honor the emotional truths they create. And perhaps, above all, a reminder that even a quiet tragedy can shake a world built on noise. For now, viewers watch, wait, and wonder whether Luna's story is truly over, or whether her absence will become the catalyst for storms still building on the horizon. Because in the world of the bold and the beautiful, silence is rarely permanent, and shadows always hide the beginnings of something new.